Okay. So probably you are a bit tired because you already have another sections previously, which ends quite late, isn't it? And I'm also tired too because I have just vaccinated against COVID-19. So I have just vaccinated. So now I wonder, where did we stop last time? Because a long time, so I already forget. Someone remind me, where did we stop? And where should we start now? Last time I remember that we talked about skills needed for critical thinking study. Is it? Do you remember anything? Can you hear me? Can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, can you remind me, where did we stop last time? Critical thinking skills or what? So how many sections we already studied together with each other? How many lectures that I gave you? 2 or 3?
Oh, Miss, we were at the differences between general and specific language.
Okay, good. Okay, great. Good. And I suppose that there are some presentations for today, or someone prepare a presentation or not? No? No group is preparing for a presentation today?
Yes, you don't say anything about the presentation.
Okay, okay, so never mind. There will be another chance for you to do it. So we already discussed that language is a very important tool for legal reasoning. I just plug in the electricity because it's run out of battery. Okay, so I believe that last time we already discussed why language is an important tool for our legal profession, and therefore we need language skills. Someone remind me why language skills is so important for legal reasoning. Why? Why language skill is essential to legal reasoning study? Ngọc Yến, can you share your view?
Yes. Okay, so I think the language skills is crucial or essentials for the subject of legal reasonings, because language is the basic and is the tool to communicate between humans. So it's important for the legal reasoning.
Okay. Based on your explanation, I believe that language is essential to all of professions, even doctors, even engineers, and even singers and painters, right? Because you explain that language is a communication tool for all of the human beings' activities and connections, right? If we have the social connections, we need language. So there is no thing that we consider language skill is so essential, so important to our legal reasoning. It's like other professions, other careers. So we cannot see the special aspects of language in legal reasoning particularly. So I would like someone to make it clear and emerge, make it much more better to have view of the role of language in legal reasoning, which is more special than other areas. Now we look at other professions, like an engineer. When they want to they want to produce an airplane, a motorbike, a bicycle, such as. Well, compare with the doctor. When we would like to cure or to fight against COVID-19 disease, what should we need? Well, compare with the painters. When they want to make a pictures, right? Draw a picture. What do they need for their profession? Châu Long.
Yes. Sorry, but I'm not quite, I don't quite understand your question.
The question is that in other professions rather than law, right? Rather than our legal profession. For example, the engineer in their work, when they make the products, they produce the products, what kinds of tools they need in order to produce a motorbike, an airplane, a bicycle. What about the painters when they produce a painting, a picture? What do they need for their job? What about the doctors when they want to cure a disease? What do they need? Only language, isn't it? No. Is it, Châu Long?
Yes, not really language, but they need the tool for the artists. They need their creation or
materials, brushes,
yes, materials,
right? Brushes, colors, right? And what about doctors? In order to help the patients, what do they need? Only language? Just giving advices or what?
They also need medicine,
right?
Yes.
Medicine, tablets, vaccine, like me just vaccinated. What else? What about the engineer? In order to produce an airplane, a ship, a motorbike, what do they need? Variety of materials, right?
Yes.
And also machines too. Okay, so that is the things that all the profession need in their job, right? But in our legal reasoning, do we need a laboratory? Do we need machines? Do we need materials? Do we need other things? Or mostly we need is the language. What do we need in order to give our legal advices? In order for the judge to make a judgment who win or who lose in their disputes? What do we need? How can you give your legal advices to your clients? Language, isn't it? Can you see the differences of the language used in other professions and in our legal profession? Can you see that? Yes or no? Can you see the points? Ngọc Yến, Châu Long.
Yes, I see the point.
Yes, I see.
Yep. So therefore, you see, in our legal professions, language is not just a way to communicate normally, but it is our professional tool. It is the form, the tool that we provide our legal advisors. And also the rules, the norms, the law, the legal standards, they are all presented in the form of language. While in the other professions, language is needed at the basic level as a communications way between people. But in our professions, that all of the knowledge are presented in the form of language to provide it, our legal advisors or legal judgment to the others. And therefore, the role of language in legal reasoning is quite essential. And therefore, why language skills are essential to legal reasoning. This includes not only general language, but also specific language, right? General language, including language that used in ordinary situations, but specific language skills like reading and writing. In legal field, you need to provide a very persuasive text or arguments, and therefore you have to improve yourself a lot with writing or argument construction skills. Previously, you see the title of the slide is general and specific language skills. So we have general skills, including listening, speaking, writing, and what else? Speaking, listening, writing, and what else? I remember 4 skills.
Reading,
Yeah.
listening,
Listening,
writing.
Yeah. Reading, writing, listening, and speaking. We have general 4 language skills. A specific skills is focused on more on writing because we need to write a lot. Later on, I will discuss with you about this issue. And we need to read well. Why? Because we need inputs in order to process and then produce the output. And when you face with new legal issues, you have to read a lot, right? Therefore, we need specific reading, writing skills. And another skill, which is very important to lawyers too, which is oral argument skill. It is kind of speaking language. Speaking skill, okay? So here another questions. General and special language. Special here means special terms, special phrases used in this area, this discipline, which has different meanings in comparison with its ordinary meaning. So therefore, special language such as Latin words, normal French, right? And even some terms which is explained within a specific scope of application. And therefore, we do not only use the general terms and phrases used in ordinary situations, but we also use some terms which need to be interpreted, right? Another skills which is very important in the legal field is intellectual and technical skills. Okay, when we deal with disputes, people often try to provide as many evidences and proofs to persuade for their aspect or for their rights. But the judge needs to distinguish which evidences have more value than the others, right? For example, the husband came to the police office and made a statement that he had heard from his wife that she killed someone. And when she came back home, he saw him in blood. Her face was very curious and astonished, feared and scared. And that is the statement from the husband. And then the police officer home for the meeting with the wife, his wife, and also asked questions, made an interrogation. And his wife provide also statements about what happened, right? So now we have statements from the husband and the statements from the wife who actually did present at the crime scenery, at the crime place. Which statement is more reliable? What do you think? Which statement is more reliable? The statement from the husband when he presented what he had heard from his wife, or the statement directly from his wife about what happened. And you know that all of these statements are quite similar. They are not conflicted with each other, right? So which one is more reliable, from the husband or from the wife?
I think from the wife.
From the wife. Why do you think so?
Because,
why do you think so?
Yes, because this is a statement from the one who is the primary sources. Like, she's the person who speak that statement, not from another person hear that statement and then repeat it.
Okay. Similarly, yeah, you have the contracts, and now it's commercial contracts, and there are disputes between the contracting parties. You see the original copy, and you see another photo of the original copy, the original hard copy of the contract. So now you have to evaluate the values of each of these pieces of paper. And also then you have the comments on that contract too. So you have to evaluate also the quality, the values of each of these papers. So all of these kind of evaluating the value of the source of information is called the technical skill, right? So therefore, it's very important in the legal field to locate and distinguish between primary and secondary source of materials. And another point is that how to read text of the law and how to read text about law. If you know these techniques and apply these techniques into your reading, you can save a lot of time and you will improve the efficiency of your work. Also, how to write. Because if you write without references, your arguments or statements are not reliable. In the field of legal reasoning, you need to have not only practical evidences, but you need also the rules, the norms, and also the interpretation explanations of the qualified people to persuade for your views or arguments. And therefore, using references is very important. Also, when you write a long paper, then you need to make a summarize, right? You make a summary, and it's very important to know how to summarize your paper, how to take notes when you use them for constructing your arguments. But here, reading text about law and reading text of the law, we will have another separate chapter. And therefore, within this part, I mostly focus on the first issue only, right? How to locate and distinguish between primary and secondary source of information. Primary source. Okay. So primary source is defined as follows. These are direct evidences or original sources of information created at the time the event occurred. Can you give me some examples of direct evidences of something? I can give you, for example, okay? The contracts signed and stamped by the contracting parties are direct evidence of their agreement in commerce issues, right? That is a kind of primary source. What else? That is an example from me. I would like to hear your knowledge and your know of. What did you know about the evidences? Oh, primary source. Can you tell me something? Mình nghe.
Yes. I think of primary sources or direct evidence like the video clip or the tape that you can take from the camera that can film all the processes from a crime.
Okay, but the original one, not the one that we take out from that moment and then we revise on it, right? Okay, that is kind of the original source of information. What else? For example, the meeting. We have the company members meeting. We also have the board of directors meeting. And during the meeting, there must be the report, right? The minutes of the meeting being back. The minutes of those meetings. So that is a kind of original source of information of what happened because it's created at the time the event occurred or something that created soon after the event occurred is also a direct source, you know, so the primary source of information, okay? So there are a lot of examples. First-hand accounts of the event, data collected for scientific studies, the interview, and then the minutes of all of the answers from the interviewees, or historical documents like contracts, okay, notes, maps that distinguish the national borders between countries, or other documents. Here, for example, we have the book Long Walk to Freedom, the autobiography of Nelson Mandela. So this means the book is written by Nelson Mandela from his own experience. Okay, so I wonder whether this is a primary source or secondary. Quang Minh, what do you think? Quang Minh.
Yes, Miss. Can you repeat the question because my internet is not stable now?
Okay. Here, Nelson Mandela, I believe that you know him, right? The former UN secretary. Nelson Mandela was put into the prison for a very long time, and he was a black man. He was put into the prison because he fighted against the discriminations between races. And therefore, when he was released from the prison, someone asked him whether he hated the white people. And that he said, if he store or keep the hate next in his heart, it means that he is not having a freedom yet. So because he didn't hate the discriminations on Black people, and therefore he also hates the discriminations from the Black people against the white people. And he don't want to keep the hate in his heart to let him to be free, right? So here is his experience in the prison and his experience about his fight for freedom, for destroying the discriminations between people because of their races. He wrote this book based on his own experience. I wonder this book is the primary source of information or the secondary.
I think this book is primary sources.
Why?
Because he wrote this according to his experience in the region, in his recent times.
Okay. What about changes a little bit for this story? Mr. Nelson told you, Quang Minh, about his experience, and you wrote a book, the same name, Long Walk to Freedom, the experience of Nelson Mandela. Is it the primary or secondary source of material? What do you think?
I think my book is secondary sources because I write this according to the story that Nelson Mandela has told to me. And
okay.
Not my real experience in the region.
Okay. So because you wrote not your self-experience, but the experience of Nelson Mandela from his story, and therefore you consider your book is a secondary source of information, right? Now, I'm writing a paper about your book,
Yes.
and I cite at page 49. There is a story that Nelson Mandela told Quang Minh on the date and the time over there on, for example, 11 December of 1998, for example, that. And from that page, the author commented that Nelson Mandela had experienced a very difficult life, a struggle inside of his heart before he found himself the way to freedom. For example, I write my comments about your book. Okay, so in this context, can you tell me what is the role of your book? It is a primary or secondary source of information in comparison with my paper.
Oh, this is tough question. So
tough question, very tough one. What about the other thinking? Ngọc Trần, Trần Ngọc. Trần Ngọc, Ngọc Trần. Couldn't see Ngọc Trần here. What about Bảo Ly? What did you think? Where is Bảo Ly? Yes. Yeah, have you heard the conversations between me and Quang Minh, right? Have you heard, Quang Vinh, conversations between me and Quang Vinh? Yes or no? What's wrong? What about San? I have seen here San. Please rename yourself for the full name and the student number, okay? San.
Sorry, miss.
What do you think?
In my opinion, so in this case, your writing can be considered as the, Mr. Min's writing can be considered as a primary document because you are going to review his writing. So you based on his book to draft your own document. So as a result, so you're going to give an evaluation on Mr. Ming's work, not not on Nelson Mandela's writing. So as a result, so in this case, Mr. Ming's writing is the primary source.
Great, San. Very good answer. Great. Exactly. And when we decide whether this piece of information is primary or secondary, one of the criteria which is very important for us to be based on in order to make that distinguishing is that, first of all, the purpose of our use. And the second one is the context of our use. For example, if Mr. Vinh wrote this book based on Nelson Mandela experience, So in comparison, in terms of the experience, this is a kind of secondary materials because not the author's experience himself, right? In terms of the experience. But in terms of the language, the style, or the opinions of the authors about the experience that Nelson Mandela had to suffer in his life, the comments on that is the comments originally created by the author himself. And therefore, that piece of information would be primary, belonging first-hand created by the author himself. And therefore, in terms of that commentary, it becomes originally, not the secondary. Further, San exactly explained the situations that I gave at my paper when I commented, explained, or giving my evaluations on the paper written by Mr. Quang Vinh. It could be the secondary because I cite Mr. Quang Vinh's paper. But furthermore, when Bảo Ly or someone's evaluated my own views and they cite my papers, and my papers become the primary source of information. And therefore, when we decide whether the piece of information is primary or secondary, you also have to note of the purpose and context of its use, not only the definitions here we have seen. Okay, about secondary. In general meaning, secondary source of information is information which is derived from primary source, or which is written about primary source of information, or which analyze, interprets, discuss information about the primary source of information. So this kind is very general meaning. But in legal profession, you see that if the paper provides summaries, interpretations of the law or the facts, because it is our personal views or someone's views of the issues, right? And therefore it becomes secondary. The rules, the law, the norms themselves are primary source of information. The facts themselves are primary. Again, I already mentioned this one. So you have to check the context and purpose of its use. Now my questions to you. Why should we use primary sources of information? What is the strength or the benefits of the primary source? Huỳnh Nga, Mai Huỳnh Nga, that is your name, Huỳnh Nga, isn't it?
Yes, that's my name.
Okay, Huỳnh Nga. Thank you, Huỳnh Nga.
So we can answer this question by comparing it with secondary sources. When it comes to secondary sources, we're reading a piece of work through other people's viewpoint. So is to some extent is not authentic anymore because we also reading and analyzing the author's viewpoint, but not the original story. We should use primary sources because from that, not only we can see how the storyteller tells us the story, but also from that we can receive the original feelings and reaction of the storyteller.
Right. Thank you. What else? What else? So we need primary source as an input for developing our views, our evaluations, right? Critical thinking, etc. Ngọc Mai, can you see some benefits of using primary source of information?
Actually, I do think like Huỳnh Nga, because using the primary sources, we can see the original information, but in the secondary sources, the information may be changed or not really exact like the original one.
Yeah, the exactness, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. What else? Try to look back to your knowledge and experience in our life, why we should use primary source of information. Sang, Thiệu Sang. Thiệu Sang and Sang is different or the same person?
Yeah. Sang is my full name. Thank you. Sang is my full name.
So you already answered me the previous question, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, I did.
Thank you, Shang. Okay. Hảo Nguyên. I would like to hear your views of benefits in using primary source of information. Hảo Nguyên.
Yes.
No benefit at all. We don't have to use primary source of information, is it?
I have the same opinion with Huỳnh Nga.
Okay. So now I suppose that first of all, primary source of information happens after the events have been occurred or at the same time when the events occur. And therefore, in addition to the exactness, it helps us to explain how these events occur, right? Recording of the major events, okay? And how are they related to each other in the time? Because maybe some events happen at the same time and we have different reports or minutes, and using them, we see that maybe we find out the very important relationship between them. What else? Because the primary source mostly give us the facts, right? Give us the picture of the facts. What happened? Rather than what about the order, people thinking about that. And therefore, primary source help us to collect facts rather than opinions about the facts. Having the true facts is very important. Because sometimes the opinions are based on the interest, based on the benefits of the people to provide such opinions, based on the views or the approaches of the viewer. And therefore, we need the facts too, because sometimes we want to develop our own view. We don't want to be bothered or interrupted by the other opinions that make us to become dependent, right? Sometimes we would like to have independent feeling, independent approach to the facts ourselves. We want to know truly what happened. It's not a simple question, but maybe sometimes it's very hard to find out what truly happens. And therefore, using primary source of information help us to collect facts. And because we have the facts and we have other materials as well, so that is a kind of input for us to critically distinguish between facts and opinions. What else? That's here. In some cases, you know that when there are some disputes of the contracts and now people just argue for their rights, their benefits, rather than accept the increase in obligations, you know? Within one legal case, the two issues only, facts and rules. And to the end of the law regulations, the issues is rights and obligations. When you see the disputes, that is not the agreements between those involved, but rights and their obligations. That is the only main issues to be discussed. And therefore, by viewing the historical events, the historical materials, we can build up our own conclusion and analysis about rights and obligations of the involved parties. And that is very important. When you have a legal case and disputes in front of you, try to find and use the primary source. They are reliable evidences, okay? So now I wonder, should we use secondary source of information? Is there any benefit at all regarding secondary sources of information? Any benefit at all?
Yes, I think that we should also read secondary sources because we can gather and collect many various opinions from different people.
Why should we know more opinions of people?
Because sometimes we may don't have the knowledge of the field, and we can read from others, maybe from some experts, to get more knowledge.
Right. First benefit is that you need secondary source of information to gain the expert knowledge on the issues, their views, their comments, right, on the issues. What else?
I think it's time because, well, when you read primary sources, maybe you can develop your own conclusion immediately. After that, you can read another secondary sources to collect the information from another different sources, and then you have a knowledge to form your own conclusion, to form your own opinion.
right? Saving time. Sometimes if you want to find down the original source of information, you will find hard because time is lapsing, passing, and the overlaps of time will cause some of the issues in finding the original source of information. Or sometimes if you like to make a scientific study, you have to go to interview people to have the data collected. It takes a lot of time, right? So therefore saving time by using secondary source of information. What else?
Okay, so who's can speak?
Okay, Hiền Long.
Okay, so my name is Nancy, so sorry for that. So in my opinion,
Louder, louder.
yes, okay. So in my opinion, sorry for let me change my micro so I can speak clearly.
A lot of background noises and I couldn't hear you well.
Okay, so could you hear me clearly?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay, so in my opinion, secondary sources provide kind of good overviews of a certain subject. So it's kind of useful for you if you need to find something about an area or a field that is not your major or that is new to you. Also, in the case of writing research, you can find keywords or something important for you to describe a subject area. Okay, yes, that's some that's my.
Yeah, thank you. Great. Ngọc Yến, go ahead.
Yes, I think the first benefits of the secondary sources is it will help to locate the primary sources and it will help in the legal research as agrees with Long ideas. Moreover, I think that there are some other benefits of the secondary source. For example, if the primary sources is written in the language that you cannot understand, so the secondary sources will help you to have the enough context to grasp the full extent of the primary sources, and it will help you to help the ideas, the opinions of the primary sources.
Okay, right. So using secondary source of information, giving the expert knowledge, right? Even not expert, so sometimes it can give you different views, different approaches on the issues. It is a signpost. It helps you to find down the original source of information too. Okay, yep, a lot of benefits. What else? Do you have any more to share? Okay. Right, thank you, good. So it seems that you prefer to use secondary source of information rather than the original one. It seems that secondary source of information has more benefits than the original one. Is it? As I see you share a lot about benefits of secondary sources of information, but very little about the original one. Do you think that the secondary sources of information is more important than the original one, more beneficial than the original one? What do you think? Before giving the answer for that questions, I would like to point out several issues about using or benefits about using secondary sources of information. First of all, getting knowledge, getting expert opinions in order to help you to evaluate about the issues you concern, right? Sometimes you yourself, in lack of experience or in lack of knowledge or expertise in order to evaluate the issues comprehensively. And therefore, the secondary sources of information providing the interpretation, the commentaries, the discussions, the analysis, the explanations on the issues, and therefore it's very helpful. And you see, sometimes we have only one original piece of information, but we have a lot of secondary source of information, a lot of comments and analysis about the same issues, different views, different people. And therefore, another benefit of using secondary sources of information is that you can gain insight of the issues by examining different perspectives about the same event. And these kind of benefits bring together to help you to form your own opinion, your own view, your own evaluation about the issues. And therefore, the last point in terms of time saving, time consuming, finding the original piece of information is taking time. And therefore, I have to open the bracket to talk a little bit about academic research, scientific research. Why scientific research is valuable and highly evaluated. Because the scientists, the researchers have to spend more time on collecting the original information, in providing the reliable evidences on the things that they would like to discuss. And therefore, you see, having the original information is quite time consuming. And therefore, using the secondary sourcing information, they already did the collections of data. And now you just cite their work in order to build up your comments. And therefore, this is a kind of benefit. But now I wonder whether secondary sources of information is more advanced, having greater strengths than the original, or each of the source of information has its own strengths and weaknesses. What do you think? We come back to the questions I already raised to you before we come into this point.
Yes. So it's definitely that each kind of source has their own benefits, whether we're talking about secondary sources or primary sources. But the fact, the story is that we as students have the opportunity opportunity to read more of secondary sources. That's why we are able to provide more benefits of secondary sources rather primary sources. But if we need to discuss is definitely that if we don't have primary source, we definitely will not have secondary sources.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I can understand there are some strengths and weaknesses, right? Okay. Here, I did have a proof, right? A short comparison between primary source and secondary. I didn't point out the strengths and weaknesses at all. Later on, we will further to talk about it. He now already a little bit mentioned about it. But here is a summary again. Primary source created at the time of an event happened or very soon after. This guarantees the correctness, but not always, right? Sometimes even the meeting is happening. As a secretary, I'm sitting here and typing, but sometimes I'm distracted, or sometimes I could like to revise the speech of someone in the meeting in the way that benefits my boss, rather than truly according to their speech or their presentation. And therefore, don't always believe that all types of primary source of information are correct or are justful. You have to check even the values of each of the source you receive, okay? Sometimes even these third parties presented their contracts to the court, or even sometimes people presented the notes of receiving money. But actually, the number of money they receive are less than, in fact, they received. And therefore, even primary source, the things that created at the time of the event, for some of the intentional issues or some unintentional issues, problems, they can be not trustful. I have met some students, they always believe that primary source of information is always true, trustful. That is not correct. But primary source created soon after the event or at the same time of the event, and created by someone who directly seen the issues or heard an event by themselves. What about secondary source of information? It may create it long after the things happen, okay? So even 100 years long, nowadays people may comment about the disease happened in the span in 1918 that killed 1/3 of the populations all over the world, right? When they compare with the COVID pandemic nowadays. So therefore, you see, some commentary, some analysis may happen a very, very long time after the event happened. And secondary source of information is mostly about the opinions, the views, the evaluations, the expressions, feedback or reflections of the people about something happened in the past. And they often use primary source as examples, as part of their arguments or analysis. Okay, now we come to strengths and weaknesses. Here is my table. And I would like you to add in some more information about this table too. I wonder, is this correct to saying their primary source of information is having high accuracy? High, I don't mean that it's always correct. We can expect it has high accuracy. Do you think this is okay to consider it is a string of original source of information, the primary? Do you agree? Thanh Nhàn. Thanh Nhàn, can you give me your points of view regarding strengths and weaknesses of the primary source of information I've written down here? And if you have something more to discuss, please say it. We are listening. Thanh Nhàn.
Yes, teacher. The primary sources.
Here is the summary of strengths and weaknesses of primary source of information. Do you agree or disagree with this one?
In my opinion, I agree with this table. Primary sources. True that it had a high accuracy. And
why it is high accurated? Why it is high accurated?
Because it's the first-hand materials, and it present the fact.
Louder, please. Use your microphone and adjust the noise, the sound, the level of sound, because I couldn't hear you very well.
In my opinion, the primary sources are the first-hand materials, and they are
Go ahead.
They present the fact of the event.
Because the kind of original material, primary one, are created soon after the event. So therefore, the memory of people are still very fresh, right? Very clear. And therefore, they can retell their observations quite exactly, right? Or it happens at the same time with the events and recording directly or straightforwardly what is happening at the same time. So therefore it has higher accuracy. Is it?
Yes, it's clear.
Yeah, because of that issues. And primary source of information is higher in terms of accuracy. And another weakness is time consuming. We already discussed, so I don't want to focus more on that. What about the weakness of secondary source of information? Did you find these weaknesses of secondary source of information are correct? according to your experience, your own experience. Thúy Vi. Thúy Vi.
Yes, I'm here. I quite agree about the picnic of secondary sources.
Do you agree with me regarding this list of witnesses of the secondary source of information? Have you experienced such an issues of the secondary sources of information? Have you ever experienced such an issue, such a problem using secondary sources of information?
I don't know about the incomplete information here. What does it mean? Because
okay.
I think the secondary resources also have give more information, much reader insight about the experience, anything.
Okay. So you disagree with this point, incomplete information. Okay. Do you disagree with this point? Who agree with this point regarding witness secondary source of information? Can you share your view? No one agree with this point of the witness of secondary source of information, isn't it?
I do agree with it.
Can you explain, Huỳnh Nga?
So I'm going to give an example. Is not really related to legal field, but how we read the article on the internet or on social media. Most of article or maybe just posted by ordinary people, they didn't add the scene to witness what was really happening so that they can have the primary sources to post online. They also read it from other sources and they share and they post on their walls, also stating their opinions about the story. Is to some aspect, it doesn't have enough information for us to really evaluate the whole story, but it's just mainly about their opinion and about their feelings. And I agree that secondary sources to most of the time has incomplete information.
Okay, thank you. I show you an example. Okay, so here I just open one of my slide 5. Okay. What is it? Okay. This is one of the paper that I am a reviewer. This paper is submitted to our journal. You know that our university have a very famous journal, Legal Jurisprudence, tạp chí khoa học pháp lý, Legal Jurisprudence. And this paper is written about the tội dâm ô, right? One of the crime, sexual crimes, right? Manslaughter. So now here, they cite, this is the commentary from the authors. And they cite here the first case, right? This is the criminal. And what did he do? this is the second case. And what did the criminal do regarding the sexual touch with the victims? But you see that when I read this, I see that it is incomplete information because it cites the case, but it didn't give us the judgment. Okay, they made a commentaries on this kind of crime, and they ask the readers to view some of the very particular cases which is popular in the field. But I wonder whether this is a rape or this is kind of manslaughter. They didn't give us the information about the judgment. Although they cite the name and the number and the dates of this one, but sometimes we would like to read more because this kind of extractions from the original judgment cannot give enough information for me, like an expert in this field, to evaluate whether the judgment is correct or not. I need more information. And I found that the information of the extractions here of the original source of information is not enough for me to develop my own view and to evaluate whether the commentaries of the author is correct or not. That is a kind of the weakness of secondary source of information. Okay. So therefore, if you have a lot of experience in reading secondary source of information, you will find that sometimes you want to know more about the original issues, what happened.
Or we can replace incomplete information equal to ambiguous information.
Maybe I couldn't hear you very well. Can you turn on your volume and speak louder?
Okay, teacher, can we replace incomplete information by ambiguous information?
Okay. Some people intentionally to give the wrongful extractions, right, to guide or to lead the people's opinions. That is causing a bias, right? Do you mean about bias?
Ambiguous.
Ambiguous, what do you mean in Vietnamese?
Ý thông tin bị mơ hồ. Nếu nó không hoàn thành thì nó mơ hồ, nó hơi mơ hồ, nó không đủ ý.
Okay. Yeah, it's also happened in terms of incomplete information. Yes, it also happens. Sometimes intentionally providing incomplete information, but sometimes unintentionally to provide incomplete information. For example, in that paper, the authors, when they already read the original one and informations in their mind already, and then when they wrote their paper, they think that the other people, the readers, also understood the papers in the same facts and information as the authors. But they wrongfully thought about it because I didn't have the judgment in my hands. So in my mind, it was really empty about the situation. So I think incomplete information may be intentionally provided or maybe unintentionally provided in the secondary source of information. Sometimes for my analysis or commentary, I would like to focus on this piece of information only. But for your side, you look at another aspect and you need more information. So that is kind of intentionally for me to provide this only piece of information, but it is intentionally for you to go furthermore, right? So therefore we see that sometimes we do not have the same needs, not specific need to your particular demand. My research questions are a little bit different from your research questions, and therefore the information in the original papers that I used is quite different from your use. And therefore, in such cases, we also have a problem with incomplete information. Do you see the point, Thủy?
Yes, I see. I see. Thank you, teacher.
Yep. Okay. Very often, we see that secondary source of information do not meet exactly our needs. For example, when I do my PhD research, I departed to Australia for my PhD research. And within the first half year, almost 6 months, I do the research. You know that's such, tìm kiếm, research, tìm kiếm lại, nghiên cứu khoa học. In nature, it is the research, search and research. So I have to review all of the papers written before regarding the topics that I'm interested in doing my PhD thesis. But you see that I read over maybe hundreds and thousands of papers, but only a few, about 10 of them, I did a research about drug crimes, narcotic crimes, tội phạm ma túy, narcotic or drug crimes. So I did reading a lot, but finally I found around only 20 papers or 5 or 2 books, which are really support my study. The other papers, they also written about narcotic drugs, but not particularly to the research questions of my PhD thesis. So you see, the secondary source of information have some problems as well, especially the quality of research. Nowadays, when you open YouTube, Facebook, Zalo, messengers, you see a lot of comments, a lot of views from different people. But what views can you trust in? How many views that you can trust in even one social issues? And therefore, you see, the quality of research is very important. When you use the secondary source of information, the most important problems that you have to overcome is that evaluating the quality of that secondary source of information, that you have to evaluate first before you use them. Okay? It may be easy for you to access, not very much to cost you to have them, and it may give you a lot of information, but whether you trust them or not, whether you can use them or not, it depends on your research questions as well as the quality of that research. Okay? So now, when you evaluate the information you receive and to decide whether you should use that material, you have to ask yourself some basic questions. Who wrote this? What does it say? When was it written? Where? And particularly, why was it written? Because if something is produced with wrongful purpose, you know that every piece of paper you receive is written with purposes. No one writes down a piece of paper without purposes. Even when you text a message to your friends, you ask him something or you would like to know something, right? You have your own purposes, whether it is a big purpose or it's small purpose, it is a nice purpose or it is a very awful purposes. But always people produce a piece of writing with purposes. Even the writers even don't know much about their own purposes. Sometimes they did it for entertainment, right? That is a kind of purpose as well. So therefore you have to ask, what was this piece of information is written down, is there for you to use. So therefore you try to avoid to become frauded by the authors of that piece of information or guided or to be biased. Okay, so ask yourself these kind of questions in order to evaluate the piece of information that you'd like to use. To sum up, it is important to determine the type of information you are looking at. You have to distinguish whether it is primary information or original, or whether it is secondary of information, source of information, which just summarize, analyze, or critique, giving a criticism over the primary source of information. But the most important thing is that you have to evaluate, you know, strengths and weaknesses, you know, the benefits of each source of information for your use. And you have to understand that both sources of information are good. It depends on your critical evaluation. Okay, so we stop here, and I hope that you use this knowledge in your daily life. You know, this subject giving you the theoretical background, but the final target, the objectives of this subject is develop in yourself these kind of skills, critical thinking, okay, language skills, as well as the technique skills, so that you can use it in your career. Not only stop here for theory, but further, okay? So try to apply it into your life. So I would like to mention a little bit about the legal research or legal reasoning. So within legal reasoning, we have to use rules and norms. They are primary source of information. They are generated by a government or some bodies like the judge in terms of case law. The source of information is a must if you give a legal reasoning, a must. Secondary source of information in the legal field, including comments, commentaries, interpretations, analysis, and even the judgments themselves that interpret the rules into particular circumstances. Okay? Here. Rules are mandatory, binding. Okay, and sometimes the rules are persuasive. Means that there are some options, similar cases. And secondary only have the persuasive authority. Comments from your professors of law, commentaries from the judgments, or other things like researchers. All of these are only persuasive. Okay? You already know this, don't you? Do you know this? This is basic for law students. And I hope that you already know it, right? Okay, so we stop here. Is this a primary or secondary source of information in terms of legal field, legal reasoning? Thùy Trinh. The Constitution of Vietnam. Is it a primary or secondary source of information in terms of legal reasoning?
I think it is a primary source, right?
Yeah, primary. Here, primary source, mandatory. They are rules, law, norms, okay? Good, thank you. Okay, so see you next time. I will go to the next skill later on. See you next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye, teacher. See you tomorrow.
Tomorrow? Really?
Yes, we have so many lessons in this week.
Really? Let me have a look. Oh, tomorrow afternoon, right? Okay,
Yes.
see you tomorrow afternoon. Okay. Goodbye and see you.
See you.